Hello girls. So after finishing 3 prose pieces and 3 poems from English textbook Mindscapes, and after completing little bit of grammar and a little bit of writing portion from the syllabus, today I shall be dealing with a very interesting portion of our syllabus, and that is a drama from our rapid reader, and that drama is Macbeth. So first, let us know a little bit of Bard of Avon, that is William Shakespeare first, and then we shall move into the drama of high esteem and a very famous one in English literature and in the world of media also, Macbeth. So first, let us know something about William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet, and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. He is often called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon. His extant works, including collaborations, consist of some 39 plays, 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, some of uncertain authorship. He was the son of John Shakespeare and Mary Arden. He was born in Stratford upon Avon, where he was baptized on 26 April 1564. His date of birth is unknown, but is traditionally observed on 23rd April, St. George's Day. He died on the same date in 1616. Many people believe Shakespeare is the best British writer of all time. His many works are about life, love, death, revenge, grief, jealousy, murder, magic, and mystery. He wrote the blockbuster plays of his day. Some of his most famous are Macbeth, Hamlet, and Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare had the insight into the characters' feelings and motives, and cleverer handling of light and dark, change of pace, and the weighing up of right and wrong. So girls, this was a very short account of William Shakespeare, the finest and the greatest dramatist of all times. Now let us move on to one of his famous dramas or plays, as I just told you, Macbeth. And we have in our syllabus 5 of his dramas. And let us start with Macbeth, one of the finest tragedies of all times. So an introductory note for Macbeth first. Macbeth, full title, The Tragedy of Macbeth, is a tragedy by William Shakespeare. It is thought to have been first performed in 1606. It dramatizes the damaging physical and psychological effects of political ambition on those who seek power for its own sake. Over the course of many centuries, the play has attracted some of the most renowned actors to the roles of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. It has been adapted to film, television, opera, novels, comics, and other media. So this was, girls, a very short introductory note on the first drama of our syllabus, Macbeth. Now let us move on to the abridged form that we have in our book, in the rapid reader that we have in the syllabus. So I am very sure that this is going to be a very interesting drama for you all, and you will surely like it. So let us move on. When Duncan was the King of Scotland, there lived a brave general who was looked up to with high esteem throughout Scotland for his great valor and skill in wars. He was also a close relative of the old king. He was Macbeth, the Thane of Glamis. Of late, he defeated a rebel army assisted by the troops of Norway in great numbers. So we find that this is talked about Macbeth, the Thane of Glamis. Glamis is a very small village in Scotland, and Thane is a honor of Europe, and that is equivalent to Duke. So we find Macbeth. The two Scottish generals, Macbeth and Banquo, were returning from the great battle. So it was a battle, and these two were engaged as the chief of the army. There was thunder and lightning. See, from the very beginning, Shakespeare creates an atmosphere of something unnatural to happen. Okay? On the way, they were stopped by the strange appearance of three figures that looked like women, except that they had beards, and their withered skin and wild dresses made them look like unearthly creatures. So girls, I would like you to notice this word, unearthly creatures. Means the creatures, the figures were not of this earth, not of this world. They were someone very different from us. They were not human. They were dancing, they were singing, they were merrymaking. What they were singing? They were singing, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. So this, by this, Shakespeare prepares us, the readers, or the audiences, when this has been enacted on the stage, for something foul to happen. Means something beautiful is to be transformed into bad or evil, and some evil is going to be transformed into something beautiful or fair, and something uncanny or something very odd is going to happen. As they saw the two generals, the first witch, look for this word, witch, saluted Macbeth with the title of Thane of Glamis. So one of them came towards Macbeth and saluted him as Thane of Glamis. The general was scarcely startled to find himself known by such creatures. The second witch addressed him as a Thane of Cawdor. Now, the next very unexpected address to Macbeth we see here, and Macbeth was himself very surprised because he was only then the Thane of Glamis, a small village of Scotland. Then he was addressed as Thane of Cawdor, a much larger place than Glamis, to which he had no pretensions, and he did not ever expect to hear something like that. And the third told him, "You will be the King of Scotland hereafter." Now the most important and most significant address and the prediction from the third witch, and that was very interesting on the part of Macbeth, because he was himself a very ambitious man, as we will find it later on in the play. Such a prophetic greeting might well amaze him, for he knew that as long as the king's son survived, he could scarcely hope to succeed the throne. Yes, that was very natural, because the king was alive, his two sons were alive. How could Macbeth be the King of Scotland? This was a very unpredictable a prediction from the witch. By this time, Banquo was curious to know the reason why the witches had little to say about him, whereas they kindled hope in the heart of his dearest friend. So the witches turned towards Banquo and told him in somewhat riddling terms to be lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy but much happier. So you can see, girls, that whatever Shakespeare has begun the drama like, he had created a very interesting atmosphere altogether, right? And both these two friends were said something or the other. They also prophesied that although Banquo would never reign as the king of Scotland, yet his successors would be the kings. Another interesting part of the thing, that Macbeth will be the king of Scotland, and although Banquo will never be the king of Scotland, but his sons will be the kings hereafter. And then they turned into thin air and vanished, by which the generals realized the weird sisters to be witches. Now, this was really unprecedented and very unexpected for these two friends, and especially for Macbeth, because as Macbeth is shown as a very ambitious man, as a very ambitious character in this drama by Shakespeare, we will find that he will do anything, I mean to say anything, to become the King of Scotland and to make this prediction or the foretelling of this witch true. While they stood there pondering on the strangeness of this adventure, there arrived certain envoys from the king, who were empowered to confer upon Macbeth the title of the Thane of Cawdor. Now some, envoys from the king came there at that very place, and they addressed Macbeth as not as Thane of Glamis, but the Thane of Cawdor. So I hope you understand that one of the premonitions, one of the predictions has been true. And this will, awake in Macbeth a sense of ambition, a sense of doing something evil. It was an event so miraculously corresponding with the predictions of the witches that Macbeth stood there wrapped in amazement. He was really very surprised. He was amazed. He was enthralled. He was excited, unable to respond to the greetings of the envoys. Hopes began to swell in his heart as he was now thinking of prediction of the third witch. As I told you that yes, Macbeth will be more ambitious from now on. Turning to Banquo, he said, "Do you not hope that your children will be the kings of the future, since what the witches promised to me has so wonderfully come to pass?" "That hope," replied Banquo, "might enkindle you to aim at the throne, but oftentimes these ministers of darkness tell us truths and little things to betray us into deeds of greatest consequence." So you can see from this statement from Banquo that Banquo was far more, having more intellect than Macbeth. Macbeth was ambitious but a little foolish also at the same time. But Banquo was ambitious, but he was much more cleverer and intelligent than Macbeth was, because he well understood that these witches were devilish in nature, and they had said something very, very interesting, that is very unreal to happen. But once it had happened, Macbeth was flying in colors, So his ambition once again was awakened in his heart. However, the prophecies of the witches had sunk too deep into the mind of Macbeth. He was always thinking about that ambition, how to do it, how to become the King of Scotland. He told his wife about the predictions of the three witches and also its partial accomplishment. Partial accomplishment means he will be the King of Scotland, but there is something behind that. Lady Macbeth was an extremely ambitious woman. And now, girls, I would like to tell you that this character, Lady Macbeth, has been designed or fashioned in such a way by Shakespeare that she has become the most interesting and the greatest of all lady villains of all the dramas in English literature. She is so very ambitious, and she will literally push her husband into the evil deed. She spurred on the reluctant purpose of Macbeth, who felt compunction at the thought of blood. And though Macbeth had some ambition of becoming the king, but he still had some feeling for the king, Duncan, because he was in close relationship with the king. He was a relative of the king. So he could not think of the very devilish act of murdering the king. But Lady Macbeth was behind him. She did not cease to represent the murder of the king as a step absolutely necessary to the fulfillment of the flattering prophecies. Yes, obviously this word is appropriately used. Flattering prophecies, the prophecies that really can flatter a person who is very ambitious. It happened that at this time King Duncan came to visit Macbeth's castle, and as the fate has it in store, Macbeth and Banquo returned from the battle, and so King Duncan was very happy for their victory over the enemies, and he came down to Macbeth's castle to pay him a visit, along with his two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and numerous thanes in attendance to honor Macbeth for his triumph against the rebels. So you can see that King Duncan was really very grateful for whatever Banquo and Macbeth had done in the battle for their country. But Macbeth and Lady Macbeth had very evil plan in their minds for the king. Inverness, the castle of Macbeth, was pleasantly situated on a hill, and the air about it was sweet and wholesome. The nests that the shallows of the marlets had built under all the jutting friezes and buttresses of the building, it was really a beautiful and wonderful castle to be in, and the environment around it was also very pleasant and beautiful. The king was extremely pleased as he entered the palace, not only for its wonderful ambience, but also due to the attention and respect of his hostess, Lady Macbeth, who had developed the art of camouflaging his treacherous purposes with smiles and charming etiquette. So now, as I have told you, that Lady Macbeth is a treacherous woman, but she can well camouflage her mindset and mentality, whatever she was going to do, and she presented herself in a very pleasant manner in front of the king. Tired of his long journey, the king went early to bed. He felt sleepy and exhausted, so he went early to bed. And it was perhaps his last sleep. It was the middle of the night. Now over half the world's nature seemed dead, and wicked dreams abused sleeping men's minds, and not but the wolf or the murderer is out for hunt. It is very true, girls, that at night everybody sleeps. Every normal person sleeps. But a person who has some evil plan in his mind, and some kind of bat, wolves and the murderers are only out for hunt in the night time. And likewise, only Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were, not in their sleep. They were awake. This was the time when Lady Macbeth woke up to plot the murder of the king. See the mind of this lady. She was much more intelligent and having the ambition in her mind much more than Macbeth. So, she would not have undertaken a deed so abhorrent to her sex, and she was well aware of her husband's nature that was too full of the milk of human kindness to execute a contrived murder. So this, group of words is very important. Milk of human kindness. Just, the literary meaning of these words are the person who has a lot of kindness in his heart. And Macbeth was like that. But this woman did not have a drop of this milk of human kindness in her heart. And she was very much desperate to carry on, to execute her cruel purpose. She knew that her husband was ambitious, but he was not prepared for the height of crime which commonly accompanies inordinate ambition. Yes, Macbeth was ambitious, but he was not in a state, rather in a mental state, to murder the king, to become the king. She had won his consent about the murder, but she doubted his resolution, and she feared the natural tenderness of his disposition could defeat the purpose. And yes, she was sure of this, that her husband cannot do such a brutal purpose. So, armed with a dagger, she approached the king's chamber. So now she was herself into the act of murder. And she entered the king's chamber where he was sleeping in his deep sleep, and she was holding a dagger in her hand. There she found Duncan in sound sleep, and as she viewed him earnestly, there was something in his face which resembled her own father. Now, this was the first hallucination, girls, which Shakespeare has created in his famous drama Macbeth. And we will see a lot of hallucinations in this drama. But first, let me tell you what a hallucination is. A hallucination is something that you do not have in front of you, but you see that in front of you. That is not there in reality, but you see that, okay? That is called hallucination. So, Lady Macbeth saw her own father in the face of King Duncan, and she was shaken. Thus, she had not the resolution to proceed further. Now, this was a time for her to retreat, and she did not do the thing. She could not commit the crime. She returned to confer with her husband. Now that the work had to be done on that very particular night, she went to her husband. She thought there were strong reasons against the murder. Macbeth was not only a subject but also a close relative to Duncan, because besides he had been a host to the king, so his duty would be to protect the king from the threat of the murderers, not to bear the dagger himself. So this is a very unholy thing to do. He also thought how just and benevolent a king was Duncan, how clear of offense to his subjects, how loving to his nobility, that their subjects were doubly bound to avenge his death. Moreover, by the favors of the king, Macbeth stood high in the opinion of all sorts of men, and how could those honors be stained by the reputation of so foul a murder? So now in this case, we find that Macbeth was very much worried about what would happen after the murder of the king, because the king was greatly loved, honored and respected by all his subjects and all over his country. And he was accompanied by a lot of attendants and people in Macbeth's house, in Macbeth's castle. And clearly Macbeth was to blamed, obviously, after his death, because he was the host, and the host is there always to protect the guest. And the guest was who? The guest was the king himself. So let it be up to this, girls. We will carry on in our next class. Thank you.